few months ago here at the Milsurp Garage, we did a video on this Bay State, which is a 1920s Harrington and Richardson store brand gun. This video took off like no other video ever had here. And I understand why after shooting it. The popularity became really clear to me. So I figured I'd follow up with where Harrington and Richardson took these things into the 50s and 60s. Let's take a look. Milsurp Garage. Yeah, so you guys remember the Bay State video? Man, I've had a lot of fun with that shotgun. I couldn't believe how well this thing did at the trap range, and just how much fun we had with it, and then how well the video did. It was very impressive, the interest. So when I was in a gun store, I saw this guy, a Topper Model 158, Harrington and Richardson Incorporated. Had a patent number on it that we could look up. And it also came with nice bonus here. It also came with, we'll get to this in a little while, came with 2 other barrels. How cool is that? And we will get to that. These things are super cheap, so even with the other 2 barrels where, you know, you're going to pay a premium if it comes with 2 other barrels, it was still very affordable. Let's put it that way. So let's talk a little Harrington and Richardson history right off the bat, just to get that out of the way, because I hate to just jump into a gun and just start talking about it and not even at least touch the history of Harrington and Richardson. It would be impossible to cover, you know, everything without really going nuts here. So, but we could just touch on it. So Harrington and Richardson, interesting beginning to this company. They were founded in 1871 by Nathan Harrington and William Richardson. So where did these guys come from? The original H&R business was around from 71 to 86, but the origins of where these guys stepped into firearm making and into the industry was earlier. So Dan Wesson from Smith & Wesson, he had a brother, Frank Wesson. Okay, so Frank Wesson started a firearm company in 1859, sharing a patent with Nathan Harrington. I'd love to show you that patent, but YouTube will not let me. I had the number here somewhere, but I lost it. But that should be easy enough to find. So Frank Wesson, he started a partnership. So Nathan Harrington was he just shared the patent. It didn't really have anything to do with the company. But Frank Wesson started a partnership with Nathan Harrington, the patent holder's nephew, Gilbert Harrington. And that was Wesson and Harrington. And this business went along until Gilbert Harrington bought him out in 1874. But in the meantime, Nathan Harrington formed a company himself, formed H&R, Harrington and Richardson, with William Richardson, who was a former Wesson employee. So you see, this is like a soap opera almost, right? So a former Wesson employee, William Richardson, started a company with Nathan Harrington, the guy that Frank Wesson shared the patent with. In 1888, this firm was incorporated as the Harrington and Richardson Arms Company, with Harrington as president, Richardson as treasurer, and this guy, George F. Brooks, as the secretary. Harrington and Richardson both died in 1897, and Brooks became the manager with heirs Edwin Harrington, who was Gilbert Harrington's son, and Mary Richardson, who was Richardson's wife. They went out of business way down the line in 1986. So in 1986 was when the original company went out of business. If you want to go nuts studying what went on all through those years, you know, go crazy, do it. You could do a ton of Harrington and Richardson research because there's a lot of movement and all kinds of stuff going on there. There was a new company formed. I just don't want anybody to think they see something newer and think everything ended in 1986. It didn't. There was a new company that formed in 1991, H&R 1871, selling the old designs. And for those that said, hey, you know, I don't know why they don't, like, a company doesn't come along and just start building guns the way they did in the old days. You know, this is a prime example of how I don't think that really works so well. It's not like it took off. I mean, I think they struggled, always struggled. They were sold to Marlin at some point, then to Remington, and they actually just completely went defunct in 2015. And that's some H&R history right there. So the Bay State, let's cover a little bit about where we left off. Would probably be a good idea. So let's get out our Bay State info. So the Bay State here on top is this is a store brand of Harrington and Richardson. So this was based on, go check out the video if you really want to get the Bay State video. I'm saying I'll link it down below. That'll show more comprehensive coverage. But basically, this was based on a W.H. Davenport patent, which was revised by an H&R patent by this guy, Martin Bye, B-Y-E. Now, this one was made from 1909 to 1942. This particular one is a second variation that was from 22 to 30. There were different variations with these and how they were. Like I said, I really delve a little bit deeper into it in the Bay State video. But even then, these things are very complicated. Now, I just don't want, again, I don't want the Bay State name here for this one to get confused with a Bay State Arms Company, which originally made, wouldn't you believe, single barrel shotguns marked Bay State Arms Company from 1870 to 1874. These guys, they reorganized in 80. And I mean, there's a lot of history with that company getting purchased by Hopkins and Allen. And they made shotguns all the way through to 1915. So if you go back and you start doing research on the origins of the 158 right here, which we'll get to, and this is the star of the video, and we haven't even got to it yet. But I feel like the history is important to say, like, where we came from. You know what I mean? Because otherwise we'll fall flat on this Topper 58. You'd be like, yeah, where? It's not really like, one of the cool things about it is its lineage, you know, where it came from. So there's the Bay State Arms Company, which I don't want this Bay State model. This is a Harrington Richardson. It's just a store brand. You know what I mean? And there's also J. Stevens Arms Company, also made Bay State guns around after World War II. So that could also get complicated if you go back to do your research. The Bay State name, again, for this was only a store brand. It was a Harrington and Richardson model, 1908. And again, this one is a second variation. So even if you went back and you looked at a Harrington and Richardson model 1908, it looks a little bit different because there are variations of these. Yep. What a gorgeous gun. So I love that thing. It was awesome at the trap range. We had a blast with it. And I walked into a gun store, saw this guy, and said, wow, that looks like that Bay State gun, and saw it was, of course, much newer. Topper Model 158. What do we got going on here? So, again, now, I'm not really going to be throwing out a ton of information on the ones that came before this, because the problem for me is that there's interchangeability going on. And there can be barrels swapped and receivers swapped, and there's all kinds of stuff going on where you got to check chat forums, and you really got to know what you're doing, because there's different types of receivers, different types of barrels, and not everything is all compatible with each other. So I'll mention these other models, but as far as, the big thing with these things is all everyone gets into is all the interchangeability. And I can tell you that there's a Harrington Richardson Model 48. There's a Harrington Richardson Model 58. There's a few different break action single barrels like this. But when I bought this one, I researched the history on this guy, where this guy came from, and that's really where I'm gonna center my information right now. Only because I don't have a ton of information on the interchangeability of the others. So to tell you the truth, I really don't want to get too much into the other models even. This one was manufactured from 1962 through 1973. So to narrow it down now, I do not have a serial number on the receiver, so we can assume that it's pre-1968. And then I have a suspicion that this guy is part of a set that was made from 64 to 67. So I guess I can date this guy from 64 to 68, somewhere in there. That's how I would date it. So what set am I saying that this thing came with? Is a set of barrels that come with this guy. And I could only attest that those barrels are the ones that will work with this particular gun. So when I bought it, I got this barrel. This is a 20 gauge modified choke barrel. It also came with this 410 gauge modified choke barrel. And it also came with this, where does it say what it is? Doesn't say anything on it. Here it is. 30-30 caliber, 30-30 Winchester, it says on it. Those are the three barrels I got with it. And the set that comes with a 20 gauge, a 410, a 30-30 also comes with a 22 Remington Jet, and I did not get that barrel. The sights on these barrels are pretty cool. This is the 20 gauge brass bead, and look how nice it cleaned up with my trick using the jewelry cloth. This is the 410 bead, before and after. A nice polish. These things really stand out when you give it a nice polish with that rag. And here is the 30-30 caliber barrel sights. It's got a nice fold down rear sight, kind of like I call it the 1022 sight, because I just remember it from when I was young that this is what I had on my 1022. And the front sight is pretty cool too. Nice sight picture for a 30-30 rifle. I did my research at home before I came back to the store and actually purchased this thing. I wanted to look at what exactly it was. I had heard in the past that there's some danger with swapping out barrels with these things. So I just wanted to make sure that when I looked online that these were all copacetic, that they would fit. And I did read about how the Topper 158 had a set that came that way. So I was only assuming it's missing the 22 Remington Jet, which was okay with me because I'm not buying that caliber, Although afterwards, doing a little bit of research, I found that you can buy a 22 Remington Jet insert that you could put a 22 cartridge inside of that and fire 22 rimfire. You can put 22 rimfire cartridges in it, and fire a 22 rimfire out of it. And then I was, that sounds kind of cool. So I might actually kind of poke around. But what makes me hesitant is they say that these barrels, even if they are a barrel that you buy for that specific gun, could need fitting. And when they say that, it gets into a realm where you gotta, worry a little bit. Let's put it that way. So let's get these barrels out of the way for now. The patent specifically listed for the 158 is a patent by, here it is, by Mulno. Lester, was it? Lester Mulno. And it's simply for the lever that opens it up here, this button. It's pretty cool to make it just a button that you press down. I did notice that it worked a lot better that way than the side lever that you would normally press. Before that, these are the levers that you'd have like this, and it's kind of like, it is an awkward type of movement. I know these are, there's a million shotguns that have this, so I don't mean to put down the design of millions of shotguns, but that to me always was an awkward movement to open them up. And honestly, it is much easier when you're in this firing position and you're cocking it after each shot. We'll get to the operation in a bit, but it's so much easier to just press a button to have it open. It really is. Where are we? The patent. The Lester Mulno patent. By the way, that was US 2876576. Check it out. These things have what's called a color case hardened receiver. I don't know much about case hardening, but it isn't true case hardening. It's kind of like a, I guess what metallurgists that know about these things would just say that it's just for looks, like a veneer, not a true case hardening. It has what's called the later snap-on forend. We'll take a look later when we take it down. The earlier ones had a screw that held the forend down. So if you buy forends for these, if you're looking, the guns might look identical, but that's one of the things that would make them potentially not interchange, the wood. The barrels, again, are a 20 gauge modified 26-inch, 410 bore modified 26-inch, and a 30-30 22-inch barrel. The chamber variations are 3-inch and 3-inch for the shotguns. I have seen 12 gauge versions of these, so I'm thinking that ones that didn't necessarily come with this set came in other calibers, other gauges. But one of the things you have to be careful of now, this is what you have to pay attention to. There's two different kinds of receivers for these H&Rs, an SB1 or an SB2. And here's a couple of shots of the differences, what they look like. You have to, in order to tell for sure, even these experts, they have to take them apart or at least loosen the buttstock enough to be able to see inside, because on the buttstock end, you would see the skeletonizing on the SB2s and the solid frame of the SB1s. And in the front also, if you take off which is much easier to take off the forend, there's also a difference in how the metal would look up against what goes up against the forend. But the real true way to tell is really, because there's so many different variations, would be to actually just look at the receiver itself. Now, the reason why this wasn't also a whole big concern to me is because the 158 receivers are actually, believe it or not, a little bit different. They're their own thing, kind of. The SB1 is primarily a shotgun receiver. Recently, it's been fitted with a small firing pin for some pistol calibers like 357 and 44 mag, also used for the Huntsman line of black powder rifles. So this SB1 normally would be chamber fed. It's lower powered stuff. But the 30-30 in this 158 It uses a receiver that's close to an SP1. Who knows? It might be a little bit stronger than an SP1. It might be the same thing, but it is definitely rated enough to handle the 30-30. And then when you get larger, like larger rifle rounds, is where the SB2 receiver came in. The SB2 is a rifle caliber receiver, safe for about any caliber except for the belted magnums. And it says even then it was chambered for the 450 Marlin for a little while, which is, I mean, that's powerful. You know what I mean? So that's the difference between the SB1 and the SB2 receivers. This guy doesn't necessarily even fit into that whole is it one or is it the other, because these 158s were their own thing. So now as long as you're getting a barrel that's compatible that came on a 158, you should be okay, because, and again, I hesitate to say that just because there are so many different variations. This one came to me as a set that I'm pretty confident the owner, that these all came together. These were all from one set, and it's just missing one. That's what made me feel confident. Because other than that, if it was just random barrels and I wasn't sure, because of the research I did where there's so many different changes and warnings and don't mix this with that and be careful with this and that. And then just because a barrel says it's one thing, it might say it's an SB2 barrel. And then you're like, okay, this is an SB2 barrel. I'm safe. No, what kind of receiver is it on? You know, is that one compatible with it? It gets crazy. So that's why, for me, I was comfortable moving into this area, but I'm, to buy it, but I'm not really comfortable talking. I'm not an expert on what goes with what. So I'm reading all this information on what's interchangeable and how you could play around and how you could put this with that and the different receivers. And I'm not even comfortable talking about it because I don't want anybody to listen to what I'm saying and think that they're doing something safe when it's not. So this is the snap on, snap off receiver. Fore end, and this front piece right here, plastic. You know, this, even though we're moving into the into the 60s here, this is where people would start to actually complain about firearms, saying that they're made out of cheaper materials. But this is some pretty good stuff. I don't really notice a problem. It's not like a wear area. It doesn't even rub here. It isn't even necessarily a hinge. The hinge is actually here. The pin, it hinges on the pin, not on, this doesn't move. So that's why that wasn't a problem. And the barrel comes right out. This is the 20 gauge barrel. Here's our receiver here on the front is just flat and smooth. Doesn't have that line that you might have seen on the other one where it says it's from a different receiver, whatever. But yeah, we could see machining marks inside of here. Nothing's all polished, smooth. This isn't some highly refined, finely manufactured gun. These are made cheaply, but strong. These are workhorses, but there isn't a ton of money dumped into manufacturing. They're made well, but made cheaply. They wanted to keep the price point on these things down. And I'm telling you, I think these things were like $30 when they were new. They were not a lot of money. And these extra barrels make these things, in my opinion, they turn these things into the ultimate survival rifle, right? I mean, you get like an AR-7. It's like, yeah, it's a 22. It folds up into the buttstock. Okay, it does. It shoots 22s. It's a semi-automatic. It's got a 10-round mag, whatever. So that might seem like it's like survival rifleistic, but if you really imagined yourself out there in the wilderness, not that I was ever stuck out there in the wilderness for days, months, years, but I would think that it would be much better to have 20 410 and 30 30 than it would be to have a 22. And this thing breaks apart. It might not all fit in the buttstock and be waterproof and float, but it does break apart where it's just going to be as long as the longest thing is going to be the barrel. And this will fit in any, these will fit in any duffel bag. And think about it. You got a 20 gauge for like birds. I don't know, like ducks, whatever kind of bird that you want to try to shoot. Like, how are you not going to eat with this thing? You got birds. The 410 could be for like anything that runs around on the ground that's bigger than a mouse that you want to shoot. You'd be able to shoot with a 410 without completely destroying it. And the 410, very important rounds for survival purposes, And the 30-30 is very, very capable for taking down larger game like deer and stuff like that. And just like that's a true survival rifle. A 22, I mean, you want to kill a deer or something like larger, even if it was a wild boar or something like that. You're not going to kill it with a 22. What are you really going to survive with a 22? It's like, how many, and you know how hard it is to shoot a rabbit with a 22? Whereas, a 410, all right, you might do a little bit more damage to it, I would think, but I think you'd have a much greater chance of hitting it. But again, it is a single shot. So, I guess you got to be a good shot to survive. Let's put it that way. So, shooting it, I guess we might as well move into that. Here's where the problem arose for me. This thing, it might be a survival rifle, but it certainly isn't a trap rifle. What did I shoot? I shot 2 games with this thing, okay? I had some time in the afternoon. I took it to the range. I don't even know what kind of footage I'm going to post up here because I did record both games. I shot a 6 and an 8. Okay, so that's 15 out of 50. Which, then I looked at it, I'm like, percentage-wise, that doesn't seem so bad. But, man, when you say a 6 and an 8, that really sounds like you hardly hit anything. But then when you figure out 15 out of 50, that's more than a fifth of them hit. It's not completely terrible. That's terrible. That is terrible. It was not hitting clays at all. And I'm not even so much blaming it's a combination of everything. And listen, I could get away with talking like this because, you see me step up there with shotguns and shoot like 23s, 24s, game after game on this channel. So I don't want anybody telling me, oh, yeah, blame the gun. I can blame the gun. Well, when you dial in and you get pretty good at trap, I've been doing it for quite a while. It's not like it's my 5th game of trap ever and I'm rating the gun with it. I've shot a lot of games of trap, and I could kind of give a good explanation of why the gun is working or not working for me for trap. And just because it doesn't shoot trap well doesn't mean it's not a good shotgun. Obviously, it's not, this isn't what people show up to shoot trap with, so obviously, you don't expect it to do so well. It's a combination of the 20 gauge being, not as much shot flying out there. How long is the barrel again? 26 inch? It's a 26 inch modified barrel. So modified, I never do good with modified. I never do good with shorter barrels. I never do good with 20 gauge. So if I had it's like if I had just one of those 3 things, I'd survive a little bit. 2 of those 3 things, I'd survive a little bit less. 3 of those things, forget it. I'm going to fall apart. So if I had like a 30 full choke 30-inch 20 gauge barrel, I'd probably shoot decent. And if it was any of those combinations, but with just 2 of the things, I would probably do okay. But with all 3, or with just one issue, I'm saying, I would do okay. But with all 3, forget it. 6 and 8. I don't even know how much more of this video you could bear. This was a huge miss-a-thon. But what was funny was that when I hit it, there's like very few of them that I just chipped or something. You know what I mean? It's like when I was hitting them, they were when it was on, it was on. You know what I mean? didn't really seem like a modified choke for that reason. You know, with the modified choke, I think sometimes you actually hit them, especially with 20 gauge, and you might hit it so far out that I think you just pepper them. You don't actually break the thing. I've seen clays laying in a field after shooting trap, like, you know, like personal trap, not like at a place. I've shot trap where, you know, you go out there and you pick up the ones that you missed because they land in like the grass, and you might be able to reuse them, you know, because things are expensive. So you go out there and you take them before other ones land on it and break them. You might go after a few rounds and pick up the misses. And I've seen so-called misses that are peppered with shot. So you hit it, but you just you have to break it. In order to score it, you have to break it. And I think that some of these times you get a little bit of that peppering is what's going on. You might be hitting it with some shot, but just not breaking it. And what else? The Topper Model 158. Yeah, I like it, despite this trap performance here, because I don't expect it to be a good trap rifle. And I wish I can get some footage shooting the 30-30 barrel. I wanted to get some before I did this video. I wanted to prove that I had the guts to actually shoot the 30-30. But I'll do it one of these days. I'll do it. But I just waited on this video for a couple of weeks, just for that, believe it or not, figuring I'd get out there, and I'm just not getting out there. So, but I'm going to do it. Don't worry. So one of the things I wanted to show you before we go, the claim to fame for this guy, I'll show you right now, is that these things eject shells into Narnia, okay? That's one thing that they really got down pat, is these ejectors, boy. I don't even know. I don't even want to do it in here. Somebody might get hurt. This is a snap cap, by the way. This is not a real shotgun round. And these things are heavy, and I'm telling you, it will shoot. Man, there's a mirror on the wall. I got to be careful. So when you load these things, you got to, every single shot, you got to cock it. And I had heard that there were some later ones that had a transfer bar here. So this is pre-transfer bar. However, it is what they call like the rebounding hammer. So it, when you pull the trigger, right, the hammer falls and it strikes the firing pin here that pushes it forward into the round, right? But if your finger's not on the trigger, it doesn't travel that far. See how it won't go far enough? Your finger has to be on the trigger for it to go that far. There's like a safety here. So even though there isn't a half cock, if you go like that, it's not going to fire. It's preventing it like this from pushing the firing pin far enough to strike the round. You have to actually be on the trigger for it to go that far. And then it automatically will rebound back off of the firing pin, and you'll hear a click. That click is it rebounding far enough to pass that locking spot again for safety. And when you open it and eject these, oh, man, yep, it ejects them all right. Yeah, it shoots them. You see, like, I think when I'm shooting, I'm kind of ejecting them into my shoulder, because I'm actually afraid when I'm in front of the puller that I'm going to eject it. It's going to make it all the way to his lap, like sitting there with the clipboard, you know. I'm afraid these 20 gauge husks are not that heavy, you know what I mean? And it really shoots them far. So the Topper Model 158. What I got to find for this guy, here's my goal to find for this. And if I find these two, I'll do another video on it. I want to find a 22 Remjet barrel with that insert where I could shoot 22 long rifles. If I find that, I'll do a video specifically just for that barrel. Number two, I want to find a 12 gauge 30-inch barrel that goes on here. And if I do, I'll do another video on it. We'll do another trap visit, and we'll compare the numbers, and we'll see how we do. But I am not saying that there is a compatible 12 gauge barrel or even a 22 Remjet barrel. I don't know. I need to further do my research and find out. All I can tell you right now for sure is that the 20 gauge barrel that came with this thing that's on here right now, this 20 gauge barrel, it worked just fine. I shot 2 rounds of trap with it, and it worked perfectly. And these other 2 barrels that came with it fit nice and snug. So they seem like they are okay. You know, I could have shot a 410 round. That would have definitely, if I would have hit 1, that would have been a big thing. But I'm going to do a round of 410 with it, and I'll throw it in with one of those other videos if I actually find those barrels. And ladies and gentlemen, until next time, that is the Topper Model 58. How many pickup trucks in America drive around with a shotgun like this, hanging on a rack in the back? Ultimate utilitarian firearm. Takes 2 seconds to swap a barrel, and you go from shooting 410 rounds for pest control to shooting big game. I mean, it's amazing, right? The usefulness of these things, how useful they are. Y'all take care. I'll see you next time. Peace.